Hello and welcome to the Tinkercard's video gallery. Today I'm going to show you how to do multicolored embossing, and I'll be working with the Floral Bliss stamp set by Stamplerations, and this is my demo card that I've prepared. Now for this I've used, for my background, if you can see the texture, just holding it up, yep, there you should see it. I've used the foiled again art Pleuration stencil, which is this here, and my sandwich from the Big Shot with the silicone mat to emboss the background card. And I wanted to add just a little bit. I wanted to keep it pretty much clean and simple, so that's what I've done here. And so I worked with the tag to start off, and what I did is I stamped the Helenium from the Floral Bliss set, and on this one here I stamped it in Ranger Archival ink, and when I went over it with my Versamarker pen, it actually picked up a little bit of the colour. That's why I got the little grey in the flower itself. So on my demonstration here now, I'm going to try it out with Memento ink. Just different effects you can get. So, and apart from that, it's sort of pretty much simple stamping and embossing. I'm just going to try and see if you can see this on camera. You're getting like a nice enamel effect, and it actually picks it quite nicely up where you haven't put any pigment ink. So you can actually get a sort of a bit more of a 3D effect with it too. So for this here, I've only used the pink embossing powder, and then the rest I've done with clear. In my demonstration, I'll be working with the pink, I'll be working with green, and I'll be working with an ivory coloured one. What I found for this technique, what does work best, is if you got an embossing powder that is a little bit translucent despite having colour, which the Pink Marshmallow by Wow Powder, that is a little translucent. That's the one I used here for the pink. And I should think that the Coconut Ice, which is slightly glittery, that is translucent too. I'm actually not sure. I don't think I've ever used this embossing powder, so watch this space really. And then for my stem, I'm going to use the Gumball Green embossing powder by Stampin' Up, which I've had for a while, and I do know that that is not translucent, so I have to be quite careful where I'm going to put my pigment ink, because I don't want it to cover the outline. If you have a translucent one, you can just go over your outline and it doesn't matter. Right, so I've already prepared my tag, and I stamped the Helenium from the Floral Bliss set in black Memento ink. So I'm not quite sure how this is going to react with my Versamarker pen. So that is simple clear watermark pigment ink in pen form, which I'm going to use for this because it's a bit like colouring in, and then you just sprinkle your embossing powder over it. Now you can get them just in straight watermark, or I did use the one with the slightly blue tinge from Tsukineko on another project that I recently did, and I've got a video about that as well. I just can't remember what it's called at the moment. So the blue tint in this white pen here does tend to show a little bit through, so you want to ideally only use that, even though it does say clear, but it does react. So you only want to use that really if you know that your embossing powder is opaque, it's not see-through. I hope I haven't got this terminology wrong. Well, if your embossing powder is pretty much giving you a solid colour rather than a translucent one. Right, so I'm going to work with my Versamarker pen here, and I'm going to use the brush tip, and to start with I'm going to do the center bit first this time around, which I'm going to do in pink with the pink one in my card here for my tag. So all you do is you literally just, it's like colouring your colouring in with a brush. Pop that on. You don't have to go right up to the edge. And then sprinkle your powder on. And at this point I tend to say emboss it straight away, because you could theoretically go in and add the other colours at this point, but as long as that powder isn't set, your pen is quite likely to pick the powder up, and then you could end up with a colour that isn't that is a sort of like mixed with sprinkles of other colours in it. Could potentially get quite messy. Just bear in mind, your embossing powder, it is powder form until it is set, and so that's at this point I would be embossing straight away. So I'm just going to get that pink embossing powder out of the way, and it's going to get a little noisy now. So I'm going to do this off camera, and it should be quite quickly. Right, that's me done with the pink. So this can cool now a little bit, and whilst that is cooling, I'm just going to do the lower bit here for the stem, and I'm going to do that in the green. So I think for the first time I'm going to try the bullet point here rather than the brush one, because I only want to add a little bit. Remember, I said this is a non-see-through powder, and all I want to do is colour the inside rather than going over the black, which if you've got a translucent powder you can do, as you can see in the pink that I've already done. So I'm going to avoid sprinkling this as much as possible over my still slightly heated bit. And you might have noticed I didn't use an embossing body. More often than not I forget it, so I always have like a little brush handy that I can use to brush bits off. So it's going to get noisy again, bear with me. Right, so that bullet tip is actually a little bit wider than I thought, so what I'd do later on is I'd just run along the edge again with a felt tip point, because it's covered too much of the stem outline, so that needs addressing later. I'm going to get rid of my green embossing powder now. Just bear with me a moment. So it's quite good because I want the embossing powder now to be cool before I do the leaves. Because I don't want the warm embossing powder to pick a different colour up. Which can happen is, like in double embossing, you just sprinkle your powder over it as long as it's still heated, and it picks up the embossing powder, but I don't want this to happen right now. So this is done. Okay, so right, I'm now going over. They're all cold. They've cooled down quite good and quite well. Right, so I'm now going to go over and just quickly add some pigment ink to my petals. You don't have to be absolutely precise. I wasn't that precise on my other on my first project, and it sort of actually looks quite good having a couple of white bits still showing through. So it just adds to the interest on the flower itself. And I might not entirely colour the I'll try and colour the petals sort of like a little bit singly, and I'll have to see how it works out. I don't mind some of the outlines showing through. So that's why I'm not quite attempting to just flatly colour it. I thought it just would add a little bit more interest. So I'm going to sprinkle this now with my coconut ice embossing powder. Let's see what it does. And then we'll be embossing that. Right, that's picked it up. So that should be okay. It's going to get a little noisy again, so bear with me. So that's done. Let me just quickly clear the embossing powder away, and then I'll show you the result. What you need to avoid with once you've done embossing, because if you do some more like solid embossing like we've done here, sort of over a larger area, it does take a while to cool down, and the temptation is to touch it, and that will actually leave an imprint in your embossing. So really do avoid doing that, but you might already know that. So here we go. That's my embossed Helenium. Now you see the little sparkle here, and they don't really melt into each other, and it's not a problem going over an area that you have embossed, again, as long as you're being quick. And because if you heat embossing powder for too long, it sort of like soaks into the paper, which you don't want to. So this here is slightly glittery. I don't know if you can pick it up. So it's not a shiny one like the one in the center, but it gives it sort of quite a nice subtle shimmer and a bit of texture. So I'm now just going to get my, oops, where is that particular one gone? My fine liner pen, and I got quite a thin one, and I'm just going to run that down here. So you got a little bit of an outline. There you go. Just blending things in a little bit. So that makes it look a little better. But as I said earlier, for this particular technique, opaque, not opaque, you know, I've forgotten now what opaque means, and I'm sorry, I'm not English native, so but I think opaque means you can't see through, so that's what I mean. So embossing powder, that is not translucent, doesn't work quite as well for this, because you've got to be very, very careful where you apply your pigment ink. So all you'd have to do now is get your sentiment on there and decorate around it in any way, shape or form you want. I'm not going to finish this. I'll just go and pick my card up again that I've done before. So it's this one here. So as you can see, it will be a slightly different look, given that this is a little more colourful as compared to the first one that I did. So just to recap again, I stamped this one here with archival ink. It probably wasn't 100% dry, but whichever way it went, when I went over it, it picked up a little bit of the grey colour, which incidentally helped me colour these, and I don't have any translucent grey embossing powder, so that's quite a nice way of using clear embossing powder and your pigment ink pen to get a little bit of colour in. And it also was in some ways added some shading to the petals in the pink. So with this one here, I simply used Memento ink, and it didn't seem to pick up as much, so that gave me a much crisper sort of colour finish. So I'm just going to see what I'll be doing with this and how I'll be finishing this off. So you should be seeing the finished project on Thursday, what would it be, the 3rd of September on my blog, and on the Stamplerations blog too. So that's it for me. So all in for today, and I hope you enjoyed watching, and sorry I've been rambling on a little bit, but I just wanted to quickly show you how to get a sort of almost like a bit of an enamel finish, and how to actually use different embossing powders to add that sort of enamel finish to your stamped projects. So I'm just trying to see if you can see this a little bit here. So you've got a slightly shininess of the stem. This is more sparkly and a slightly more matte finish, and then you got the shiny bit again in the center. So hope you enjoyed watching, and I shall see you soon. Thank you. Bye.